Hi, it's Jack from Jack Bell's Photography again, and today I want to talk about Photoshop and large file sizes. I've been using Lightroom now for about 3.5 years, and I've had Photoshop for the same length of time and as part of my Creative Cloud subscription. And last year I decided to make a concerted effort to use Photoshop. Now, I tried a few different channels, so Serge Ramelli, Piximperfect, and Flern. There are many more. And in these they tend to have tutorials where you can follow along by downloading a file, and then that improves your learning. And I found these very, very useful. However, when applying the lessons to my own photos, I discovered that they had a dramatic effect on my storage. So typically, the downloaded files for the tutorials are around 1 megabyte, and my raw files are between about 20 and 30. And when I do work on Photoshop, then I get much bigger files. So what I want to do is show you on my iMac. So let's go over to my iMac. In Photoshop on the iMac, and first of all I'd like to show you the effect upon the size the files that Photoshop has. So here I've got 0 edits. Now if I show you the files, the raw file is 29 megabytes. The 2 file formats which preserve layer information so you can edit them in the future are the Photoshop format, which is .psd, that one's 110, and the TIFF format .tif, that's 105. Let's choose a different photo, get rid of that, and now I'm going to look at a one with edits. So what I've done here is removed an item from the foreground, and I've done some very simple dodging and burning of this photo. So let's have a look at the effects of this one. So again, the raw file is 26 megabytes. The PSD file is 252, and the TIFF is 207. So you can see how big the files are in Photoshop. Here's a more creative project that I embarked on. So I actually imported this octopus photo, and that's about 4 megabyte JPEG file, and then I duplicated the layer to create this effect here, and then used a few filters. Now I had a really big shock for this one so if I bring this up, this one is Starry Night 3 TIF, and you're talking about 1 over 1 gigabyte. So when I was playing around with the different filters, I saved quite a few versions of this, and I had maybe 7 or 8 gigabytes of storage in those. So as you can see, I haven't retained many of them. There's the original JPEG, then there's Starry Night 1 and Starry Night 3. And then Starry Night. So I've got 3, but some of them don't have all of the filters, and you can see the different file size ranging from 264 megabytes to 534 and up to 1 gigabyte. So that gave me a bit of a shock, so you can see how you can quickly use up your storage. Now if you have some sort of file system and RAID storage, and you don't have to worry about it, these file sizes, that's great. But if you're like me, then I have a 1 terabyte hard drive, and I've got several other drives. So you can see here's Lightroom. What I do is I import photos into Lightroom, and then you can see my photos, separate photos hard drive. Now what I do to manage my drives anyway is to import the photos into Lightroom, and then I periodically put them onto the photos drive. I do this in Lightroom to preserve the links, so you can see I've got various collections where I keep my the photos, my favorite photos. So by moving the folders and the photos are included in Lightroom, it preserves the links. If you do those in the desktop in some other way, then you're going to lose these links. And when you go and look at your collections in the future, you'll see a question mark by the photo and you'll have to re-establish a link. So I would strongly recommend that you use Lightroom to move your photos around and archive photos. You'll see a Photoshop folder. So one thing you could do is you could save all of your Photoshop projects into Photoshop and then use the save as to remove the layer information. And that's going to reduce the size of your folders. The disadvantage with that approach is that you can't edit the photos in the future. So your Photoshop projects, you can view them, you can print them, you can save them as a JPEG file, but you can't edit the layers again. So maybe after a few months, that's not going to be a problem for you. If you've got any really special projects, then just archive them. Otherwise, remove the layers or do what I do. I actually save my Photoshop files in the original folder and then just archive everything periodically every few months. What I'd like to show you is one option which I've started to do, and you can. I use Lightroom to do a lot of my photo editing. So Lightroom is great for doing general editing on a photo, and you can see these sliders. You can quickly change your photos however you desire. So add a bit of texture, add a bit of clarity, and in this case, add a bit of shadows. So I think that's a bit too much. Let me decrease here. Now, what Lightroom tends to do is do global edits, and Photoshop is much, much better for doing localized edits. However, if I get rid of this, there are a few options at the top. So let me click on the first. This is like a spot removal, and you can change the size with the bracket keys. And then if I click on that leaf, what I can do is I can select another part of the photo to make the copy, and then I can remove that item using this capability. And then I can apply different gradient filters. So there's a normal gradient or there's a radial gradient. And if I show you the radial gradient on the tower, then I'm going to just place that where I want it. So if we click on, then I can maybe get rid of the exposure. So, and then maybe add the shadows. And you can see now we've got a much more subtle effect just on the tower, which if we wanted to highlight just that, and maybe add a bit of clarity. So that's already far superior to what we had before. And to add new ones, you can just click on another part of the photo and then do completely different edits. So if we click new, then we can add a third one, and you can edit these independently. After you've done that, you can click on an old one, and you can do different edits there and do whatever you like. So let me get rid of these and show you another approach which is really powerful, and that is the brush tool. So you've got a brush tool here, and you can change the size of the brush, you can change your feathering. I like to use quite a low flow, so there's 25 on there. We're going to paint in exposure. So now we're going to do it subtly to the top, and you can see the more you brush, the more effect you have, and that's due to the low flow. Now, you can limit this to a part of your photo using a range mask. So if you choose the luminance here in the bottom right hand corner, and then what we want to do is just apply the edits to the darker parts. So I'm going to click on the right hand side of the luminance mask range, and I'm going to decrease it until I can no longer see the effect on the sky. So now I've applied that edit just to the bottom side of the tower, so very selective. If I want to apply another edit, so let's say I'm going to go here into top right on the foliage, and you can see I can make that much lighter according to what I want. This time for the range mask, let me select color. and what I'm going to do is use the eyedropper tool to select the green, and now that effect has just been applied to the green, and you can change the amount to fine-tune how much you actually edit. So that's restricting the colors or increasing the color range to which you apply the edits. So these are great options for applying edits selectively in Lightroom without going to Photoshop. Well, it's back to me. And what about the uses of Photoshop? I found actually Photoshop to be very, very useful, and in particular there are some things which it's far better than Lightroom. So for instance, if you want to change your background, so you don't like the background on your photo and you want to put something different, then Photoshop is much better for you. If you want to combine photos, let's say you want to do a panorama but your photos aren't quite perfect, the stitching isn't quite perfect, well, that's where Photoshop really comes in. If you want to remove items, in particular the larger, the more appropriate then Photoshop becomes. It's easy enough to remove small objects in Lightroom, or indeed if you've got something like backscatter, so I do underwater photos and sometimes get backscatter, you can do that easily in Lightroom. But in Photoshop it's actually much easier because you've got quite a lot of tools in which to help you with your editing. Also, if I've shown you how you can use Lightroom to edit specific parts of your photos, well, Photoshop is much better than that. You've got a number of different selection tools which you can use to select certain objects and then apply edits just to that. You've got a lot of different paintbrush styles which you can use. You can use those for editing or creative effects like adding clouds or fog to your photos. Also, if you want to be creative as well, so I showed you one large file where I was using a lot of different filters. Well, Photoshop is way better for that as well. Otherwise, I would suggest that until Adobe come up with a way of making Adobe files smaller, then I would suggest sticking with Lightroom for most of your editing, and indeed try and make your photos as good as possible. If you have any other suggestions on how to reduce file size in Photoshop, then please leave some comments below. I hope you found this video useful, and see you next time.